being President William Ruto's second budget. Remember, the current one that we're currently in, that is 2023-2024, is his maiden budget, but already we have witnessed some challenges in financing it, and KRA says it could miss its revenue targets by a whopping 300 billion Kenya shillings. In studio, I'm joined by very key guests. That is Honorable Dr. John K24 Mutunga. He's the Chair, Agriculture Committee in the National Assembly. That is on the far right. Seated in the middle is Honorable Dr. John Ariko, who is a Member of Parliament, Turkana South, and as well, he is a member of the Finance and National Planning Committee in the National Assembly, and as well, Honorable Nabi Nabwera, who is a member of the Education Committee and legislator from Lugari constituency. Thank you so much for getting time this morning. We're going to focus on the whole issue around financing the budget. The reason we now have Finance Bill 2024. Just to begin with you, Dr. Rico, as a member of the Finance Committee, the budget estimates are that we will have a 3.9 trillion budget. On financing it is where it's actually the biggest challenge. And now your committee is mandated to make sure the Finance Bill 2024 sails through, seeking to finance the budget by 323 billion Kenya shillings. Now, a conversation is here, and that's actually what's on our daily, that is the Daily Nation, on which one should come first, Finance Bill 2024 or the Appropriations Bill 2024? Just to begin from there, as a member of the Finance Committee.
The precedent that has been set before is that the budget estimates comes first. Then we come up with the tax revenue measures after the budget estimates. But that has been overturned by the courts, and that's why now we are running the two concurrently. The budget estimates we are doing budget estimates together with the finance bill together.
So it's okay?
Yeah.
There is no problem with having...
Now we have changed how we handle the two. So we are taking it together.
But Okiya Mtata, who is the Busia senator, argues that there is no fiscal framework to anchor the Finance Act 2024. Should it be actually asserted, or should it become a law before the Appropriations Act of 2024? You see, what do you finance if you are told you don't have a fiscal framework?
A fiscal framework, let me just start by saying, as I said earlier, that before, we normally come with the budget estimates. After coming up with what we want to achieve, then we come up with a strategy of mobilizing resources to finance our budget estimates. But if you look at last year's court rulings, what has been decided is that the two should go together. The budget estimates, we have already the budget estimates. If we have the budget estimates, then we should be having also the proposed bill, finance bill for 2024.
But in terms of adoption by Parliament, which one should come first?
Budget estimates.
Perhaps Honorable Nabi Nabwera weigh in on this.
Okay. It is fact. There's also logic in this. You want to raise money, you are raising money to finance what? So the first thing that we do is to have an appropriation bill. We pass the estimates. Then once we have the estimates, and then we say we are going to fund, this is how we are going to raise the revenue to fund what we want to achieve in terms of development, in terms of the economy of the country. So,
so your argument is that the appropriations
and I can tell you
should come before the finance bill.
Yes, and as I can tell you, in Parliament we will pass first the estimates. We can't do any other. I mean that is logic. Yeah, we will pass the estimate first before we deal with the finance bill.
Honorable Dr. K24 Mutunga, on this one, Okiya Mtata cites that it was premature to table the Finance Bill 2024 before the Appropriations Bill of 2024.
Chacha, we should remember that we had a budget policy statement. The budget policy statement states exactly what is likely to happen in the budget making.
Likely to happen, but
What
not
is
the
likely
exact
to
one.
happen. So we have an idea of exactly how much money we need to raise for the budget this year. We also have the estimates in the bill. There is already a draft bill, a bill that is being discussed across the board, which has the proposed estimates. The proposed estimates will not change much. So we already know how much money we are likely to be raising, or we are supposed to be raising at the end of the year. So the court ruling basically was to try and look at how can we manage the process while knowing exactly how much we have to raise. In this case, what are we supposed to do in order to raise the money that is supposed to be raised at the budget level? So most likely we will pass the estimates first, and then there will be the appropriation bill will be passed first, and then there will be a procedure for financing, which will come as the finance bill.
Well, back to Dr. Rico. 3.9 trillion is the budget for the next financial year as estimated. Finance bill in itself seeks to finance the budget by 323 billion Kenya shillings, if at all nothing changes. But so far you've had the uproar from Kenyans. In fact, just before you joined me on the set, I had the likes of the Alcohol and Beverages Association, also the packaging associations coming out and saying, we don't want this eco levy, we don't want these taxes, we don't want this excise duty. Where does that leave you at? Are we likely to have the 323 billion target narrowed down to even 200 billion if you scrap off those clauses?
Let me just start with a clarity on the two bills. The two bills will be passed before 1st of July 2024. The two bills. That's the Finance Bill 2024 and the budget estimates. The budget policy statement had indicated a budget estimate of 4.1 trillion. But that has been reduced in these budget estimates to 3.9. So there's a reduction of over 300 billion. So as you said, the country has to resource mobilize to finance its expenditure. What we need to ask ourselves, the performance of the previous finance bill, 2023.
Just to perhaps give us the numbers, the target was how much for this current financial year?
This current financial year.
For the finance bill 2023.
2023. It was 3.8 trillion.
I'm talking about the finance bill 2023. How much did it seek to finance this budget?
23-24. It had 3.8 trillion.
No, for the finance bill specifically.
Yes.
Billion or
trillion. 3.89 trillion. If I may remember. I think it is somewhere there.
No, I'm talking about the finance bill 2023. Finance bill 2024 seeks to finance the budget by 323 billion.
No, 302. How
3
do you finance a budget of 4 trillion with 383 billion? You are not getting your facts right.
Let me just clarify that.
Yes.
3.2 something trillion, that is 3.35 trillion is on the total revenue that we anticipate to raise.
But
the deficit, the fiscal deficit will be raised by borrowing, both the internal and external borrowing, of 500 and...
Just to make it clear, Finance Bill 2024 seeks to bring additional taxes of 323 billion.
Additional, yeah.
Yes, that's what I'm
talking about. I'm saying.
So how much did the Finance Bill 2023 seek to bring as additional taxes?
Additional taxes to? You see, initially, we had indicated that we are going to raise 2.7 billion. I don't remember that. In taxes alone. But if we add these borrowings, blah, blah, it will come to 3-point-something billion. Trillion. Yeah.
So, Honorable Nabina Bwera, perhaps on the Finance Bill 2024, already there are, there is actually an APRO on very specific clauses. For instance, 16% VAT on bread.
First of all, I want just to start where Rick has left. You are talking of bringing into space an extra 300 and about 80 trillion, billion, and yet you have fallen short of. So first of all, the math doesn't add up. The principle is wrong. If you are not able to collect by over 300 billion,
the revenue shortfall, that is,
yes,
for the current financial year.
The measures you are putting in place cannot bring another 300 billion.
But these are new taxes that are being proposed.
Just listen. If you are fallen short by 300, so it means you are going to bring on board 600 billion. You will have to double to arrive at that figure. Then therefore, that tells you the principle on which you are operating your tax regime is faulty. You know, I've kept on saying this. The easiest way to raise taxes is to gain compliance. That the taxes are so simple, they are so incentivized that each person feels obligated to pay taxes. The moment you raise taxes and the compliance has a problem in terms of collection, you know compliance is working based on targets, how you achieve targets. The moment you are falling short of achieving targets, then you know there's a problem of compliance. So you have to go back to the principles. And these principles would be, one, that either the taxes are punitive or they are not certain.
So we are likely to have more tax evasion.
That's what I'm telling you. You know when the public feels that the taxes are punitive, and they will feel punitive based on two things. One, if they see the taxes and they cannot account for what the taxes are doing. That's one way. The other way is when it's like a cow. You are milking when you have not fed it. So you can't get the milk.
So
okay?
there is need for incentives.
So, yes. So if the economy is underperforming, everybody is having a problem. You can't have 2 meals a day, you can't have 3 meals a day, and they were asking you to pay more money. There would be no compliance. Everybody will work around a scheme to evade that tax. So you will not get it.
Dr. Mutunga, you are a chair of a committee. And before submissions of budget estimates to the budget committee, usually you consider so many factors in terms of development for the MDAs, etc. But now we have more of same MPs from the minority who pass budget estimates, but on how to finance it becomes a challenge. And they're talking about, perhaps let's say other ways of financing this. Which are other ways of financing the budget, rather than even having these money bills selling through Parliament?
The revenue target for the next financial year, for the current financial year was around 2.62 trillion. And for the next one, I think is 2.94 trillion.
But the current
next
one was revised
year
down to 2.45 trillion.
Yes, because we were not able to meet some revenue, collection targets.
But still, you'll have a shortfall of 300 billion.
I would like to dispute the fact that people decide because of the way the money is used, they will not pay taxes. Because tax evasion is a crime. It's a breach of the law. So I would like to imagine that probably some prospective business is closed, or probably they did not perform as well as probably they did. And then the presentation of the books of account indicate, of course, a shortfall in the performance. And therefore, they're able to pay less than probably what we expect them to pay more. Now, when you are making a budget, you normally look at what needs to be done in a country for the year, what is priority for the country for the year, and where are the sources of the funds to fund this particular budget. Remember, Kenya has always posted a budget deficit. And the idea is to try as much as possible to reduce the budget deficit every year. we have tried as a country and measured against others to try and maintain ours at less than 6% of the GDP.
In fact,
So
Dr.
far.
Mutunga, for the next financial year, the fiscal deficit will be 2.9% to the GDP.
That's
and
what I'm
that is
saying.
around 540 billion.
The,
But this is, there's a tendency that we witness. While beginning the financial year, we tend to set it at a lower level. Then, in supplementary budget one, it rises up. Supplementary budget two, for instance, in the current financial year, we have a fiscal deficit shooting up to 908 billion Kenya shillings. So is that just for the books so that, you know, you don't look bad?
it is actually not for the books. Naturally, when you're planning, we apply a law called Murphy's Law. And there's one principle about Murphy's Law that is very clear, that if anything can go wrong, it will. So you have to be extremely careful to make sure that not many things go wrong. And remember, a budget implementation is not for one day, it's for a whole year. Again, it depends on very many factors. We can have weather changes or vagaries, or like we can have drought and it affects the entire country, and therefore the tax revenues are low. I mean, the government collections are lower. We could have changes in the macroeconomic climate. The war that is in other parts of the world may affect us. Changes elsewhere basically may affect the country, which were not foreseen in the budget. That's why it is a budget. It's not really the reality. And that's why we have supplementary budgets, to try and adjust so that we can fit within the frame of the realities of the money collected.
Dr. Rico, as a member of the Finance Committee, you also served at one point in the Controller of Budget's office, I believe. This is what the Controller of Budget, Margaret Nyakango, says. It will be a miracle to realize the 2.9 trillion ordinary revenue targets for the next financial year. 700 billion additional to what you are going to collect currently. It's a tall order. But on this other side, President William Ruto says, you know what, you need to move from 14% to 22%. Are we staring at having even a 700 billion revenue shortfall in the next financial year, hence borrow more, and of course expanding the fiscal deficit further from even the 500 or the 2.9% that we are looking at in the next financial year?
Even to GDP ratio.
You see, let's not talk about the percentages here. Let's talk about the real figures. The real figures. So, Kenya Kwanza government anticipate to increase a number of taxes, or to introduce a number of taxes, including your car. A minimum of 5% of the value of your car.
2.5%.
5,000.
5,000.
5,000. Minimum of 5,000. And a maximum limit of 100,000. Maximum. 100,000. That's one way of raising revenue. In addition to that, even the per diems, they have decided that all the employers have to pay taxes or income tax on per diems. It is there. They have introduced that. Again, they have removed some items from exempt tax to standard rate. That is 16%. That's what they are doing to mobilize resources. So, and probably, if they are going to improve on the administration of tax administration, they are going to increase the revenue. But unfortunately, we are spending a lot of money to improve on the tax administration in this republic. We have even introduced some officers called, which are these officers?
Collection assistant.
No, these guys who look like security officers, askaris, who are employed the other time by KRA. That's one way of improving compliance. Probably, I believe they're going to increase the taxes. But what I want to say is this. The more we increase the taxes, the more we see what I saw somewhere here, black what? The black will be seeing black people avoiding taxes, will be seeing tax evasion. Avoiding taxes is legal. But tax avoidance, if you don't disclose your income, you are avoiding tax.
So just for the numbers, 2.9 trillion as the target for the next financial year in terms of revenue collection. But this current financial year, we will probably collect 2.2 trillion. So that's a revenue shortfall
2.3
of... so we, that means we have to increase 700 billion. What are your projections for the next financial year? If we have a target of 2.9 trillion, yet in this current financial year, we've only managed to collect, or we will actually manage to collect 2.2 trillion.
My focus for this financial year is that KRA is going to raise somewhere to do with 2.4 billion, 2.5 trillion. They will not go anywhere above that.
With these numbers that we are talking about.
Because currently they are at 1.9 or 8.
Chacha, I want to dispute first an issue raised by Dr. here.
There are two Daktaris. Which one? Rico or Mutunga?
Mutunga.
Obvious.
When we raise taxes, the level of compliance is not as complacent. Let me tell you a simple one, and why even I disagree with Rico that they will not raise that money. I come from a sugarcane growing area. In their own wisdom, Kenya Kwanza decided to introduce e-teams. In their own wisdom, asking a villager, a widow in Luandeti there, who has no smartphone. I just wanted to listen to this. Who has no smartphone, limited level of education.
But there is a USSD.
Just listen. What are you responding to?
There's a USSD that has now been introduced for e-teams, so you don't have to use a smartphone to access
I just want to explain something. This person is asked to raise an invoice. I think that's what you don't know. He is asked to raise an invoice to the sugar factory before the factory can pay him. Now, what these people have done, they have said, okay, we are uprooting cane. We are uprooting cane, we will do tomatoes, which I don't need to raise and eat him. So the projected revenue collection from farming of cane goes zero. Fact. Secondly, when you raise so much taxes, I want to give you a typical hardware. You go to a hardware and the guy asks you, unataka risiti. Ukitaka risiti, I will increase the value. A Kenyan will tell him, mimi sitaki risiti, naenda kujenga simiti yangu hapa.
But now,
just listen. I'm explaining this. Why compliance becomes a problem when people feel pain of paying tax. They will not comply. And there's very little to do.
There is a penalty of 2 million Kenya shillings per month if you fail to comply.
Let me now ask.
And also for clarity, e-teams, there's now e-teams Lite, where you actually dial *22# to generate an invoice.
That's what a farmer doesn't want to do. A sugarcane farmer doesn't want to. He has been taking his cane to the factory. I mean, every other day he has been taking his cane. Then one morning you wake up and say, before you are paid, please dial and raise an invoice to the factory. Well, and you I can tell you, for 2 weeks there was no crushing of cane until Watanga said, okay, can we look for a middle ground? Well, you know, and I'm just explaining it to you. Let me tell you, when people feel pain, they don't comply.
Well, at that juncture, we take a short commercial break. You can join in this conversation via social media platforms at K24 TV, at Joel Chachazola, and SMS and WhatsApp numbers on the bottom of your screens. It is a conversation on the financing of the 2024-2025 budget. We'll be back with more. Stay tuned.